Welcome to Talking Business and Life with Claudio Relsano and Steve Mancini. Claudio and Steve will share their business and life experience to help you grow your business and improve your life. Here's Claudio and Steve.
Good evening and welcome to Talking Business and Life. I am your host, Steve Stefano Mancini, and I am joined by no one today. Unfortunately, my co-host Claudio had a very important engagement, so I'm all by my lonesome today. But that's okay because I'm making up for it. Instead of us having just one guest, we're going to have two guests. So I still get to talk as little as I want and turn it over to the guests. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in because I met them through different contexts. And as everybody knows, I've been filming historical documentaries about the Italian experience. So for example, a couple of years ago, I did Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner, which recounts the story of the Italian prisoners of war in southwestern Pennsylvania. Last year, I went to the Abruzzo region and I did a documentary that talks about life under the occupation during the Second World War. So for 9 months, everyone thinks that Italy and Germany were allies, and initially they were, but once the Mussolini was deposed, the Italians realized, hey, we're on the wrong side, and then they joined the Allies. At that time, though, the Germans did not want to give up that land because the simple fact is, if you look at a map of Europe, if we had controlled Italy from the tip of the boot all the way up, we would have had much easier time in hitting German cities and buying them. And the Germans knew this, so then they went down and invaded Italy, essentially. It went from we're allies to a occupying force. And so there was a lot of a combat. Everyone thinks about Sicily, but there was a lot of combat in central Italy around one of the most famous points, which is the Gustav Line. So very famous, and a lot of people that study history, especially the Second World War, they understand the significance of the Gustav Line, and it's what kept, the Allies from reaching Rome a little sooner, but it also led into the Anzio invasion. So again, if you're a World War II historian or any historian, you're familiar with Anzio and the significance of that and the costs of that. So both, in terms of human life, time, machinery, everything, a very significant battle during the war. And keep in mind, most of this is happening before we've landed in France. So during this 9 months, while all of this is going on, the Germans are occupying central region, and they're fighting different elements along the Gustav Line. And so I am joined by two expert historians who are going to talk a little bit about the research that they're doing, the work that they're doing, and I'm hoping to my listeners that we support that work. This is it's not just about supporting, Italian culture, as everyone knows, we're talking business and life. It's also about supporting passionate projects that, for lack of better term, better humanity, not losing important segments of history. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guests, Gianluca Cinelli and Patrizia Piredda. I hope I pronounced those right. You guys know, parlo italiano, ma non parlo bene. Ovviamente con cognome è difficile per me. So Patrizia, Gianluca, ciao, come va?
Ciao.
Ciao, good evening.
Good evening. We are very pleased to stay here this night because here is 10 in the evening in Italy with you.
I appreciate that you staying on. If it makes you feel any better, I think in a few weeks we move our clocks another hour. So now I think we go from 6 hours to 5 hours. I think it's 10 o'clock there right now. We're filming it around 4 p.m. Eastern. So, all right.
It is.
So good news. Next, if you will do this in March, it would only be 9 p.m. there. So, but no problem.
Thanks so much for inviting us.
Oh no, let's talk a little bit about yourselves. Obviously you're in Italy. Where are you from? And let's talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. And I am from Rome, and Patrizia is from Rome too. So we are based here in Rome, although in Italy we live in a small town, not far away from Rome, that is called Viterbo. It's a medieval town. And as you said, it's another place where the war passed, because, the war passed almost everywhere in Italy as the front line went from south to the north. So everywhere there are stories from the past. we decided to devote our time and energy to investigate this heritage that is so important for our country, and not only for our country. It's a memory, it's a complex, a set of memories and stories that are, how to say, are becoming a little removed from our present because the years are going by. And people remember these things struggling a little bit because, we live in a context that is so different from that of a war, at least in Italy, at least in Western Europe. But we notice that these things still are there in our uh, deepest memories, childhood memories, because we heard from our grandfathers and grandmothers many stories about those years. Um, so this is the main idea. We started with this project start
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah.
2 years ago, we started this project that is called Memogen, and we started to investigate and to interview people born from the 70s, 75 to 85, more or less. So actually the third generation from the war, so people that have the fortune to hear directly from the grandfathers, grandmothers stories about the war. And it was, first of all, an incredible experiences for us because is a this one is a scientific project, and we are both in history and literature field. Gianluca, me in philosophy, more in philosophy and literature. And we did not expect at that time to receive this big enthusiasm from people and this very deep human contact. And therefore, 1 year ago, more or less, we decided,
2025, yes.
2025, yes, 1 year ago, we decided to extend the project to the Italo-Americani.
Ah.
And so we applied for a fund, and the Ragusa Foundation gave us this great opportunity and sponsored this project. And so now we have extended also, and we are collected till now 22, 23
Yes, about
interviews.
22 interviews in the States with Italian Americans, and way more in Italy because the project has gone for 2 years there. So we have about 200 video interviews collected so far. And the American project, the Italian American project, we call it Memo M-IT. So it's it's kind of an acronym that gives an idea, general idea of this blend.
Now, let me ask you, if so, a lot of my listeners are Italian American. Do you care? The most important thing is you're looking for memories from the Italian campaign. So you're not necessarily worried about whether they were on the American side or an Italian soldier. You just want memories from the Italian campaign.
Well, it's not only the Italian campaign, because
Because I want my listeners that are listening, we're going to put the link to your website, and I'd like, if anybody's listening, and I'm going to want them to click on that and go visit you guys. But go ahead, tell me more about. So you're saying not necessarily just the Italian campaign. Go ahead.
yes, not necessarily this campaign, not exclusively, because you know. Um, Italian Americans who fought during the war for the American Army,
Right.
for the American Air Force, for the American Navy, were deployed all around the world. So many of them ended in fighting in Italy, in Africa, and then in Italy. But the majority of them, at least in our experience, actually served in the Navy and served in the Pacific. So it is not only concerning the Italian campaign. Of course, there is a direct connection because perhaps not as soldiers, these Italian Americans came across the Italian campaign, but they have families. Many of them have families in Italy, have extended families, relatives who remained in Italy. So, uncles, great grandparents, um, members of the family who did not move to the United States. And these relatives experienced the Italian campaign as civilians. So they had to endure the passage of the front, the German occupation, the fascist violence, and of course the arrival of the Anglo American armies. So we have a complex set of stories, not only stories about combat, of military deployment. Many of the memories that we collect actually comes from civilians, people who did not fight, but endured the war, saw the war, and lived the daily life during the war.
And that was exactly what I did when I went over there for Innocenti. That's exactly what I did. Was I interviewed? Obviously, the military were gone. In fact, I wanted to interview if there were any surviving partisans, but obviously they were all gone. So I was able to interview some children of, and I think you said something key is the further away we get, there are only so many survivors, whether they're civilians or military. Those numbers are dwindling. And I want to ask you kind of a really important question because I don't think people get it. I don't think they understand. But in your words, why is it important to put this much effort into memorializing and remembering these experiences? I mean, it's people will tell you it's 80 years ago. I don't care, but why is that wrong? I mean, I think they should care, but you tell me in your words, why is it important?
um, well, we studied from this past events, Second World War, from the side of the scholars, and when you approach the past as a scholar, you give for granted that the past is there, that the past is important, that we need to know, we need to study, and so on and so on. Um, and uh, and then one day we started asking ourselves, wondering, but real people, people who are not in the academia, who do not uh, practice the work of history, they're not historians or researchers. Um, do they really have an interest in that past? And if yes, what kind of interest? Because Second World War is still today a major part of public discourse, political discourse. Our politicians always take this war out for you know
Many
this
occasions.
many occasions, and many times we hear the strangest things because sometimes the use of the past is manipulated, distorted. Um, and as that reality is more and more detached from our daily experience, so to say, we used to say uh, communist or fascist, and perhaps these are realities we are not acquainted with, and they are not realities of our present day. We do not live in under a fascist dictatorship, so it is difficult to you know um, make these things come together without overlapping, without blurring. So we went directly to people to ask, what do you remember of those years? And how did you come across these stories? Of course, we chose a generational group that could listen to the stories of their grandparents, granduncles, grandaunts. So we are part of that generation. Patrizia and I are of that age. So we heard about the stories from our grandparents when we were kids, when we were children. And it was, storytelling. And it remains, it builds something. It's an exchange of experiences, handing down lived experience, wisdom, passion, emotion, um, it really creates something. So after 80 years, we have found out that it is so important to remember these things because of the, not of the notions, historical knowledge, because many people do not remember what military unit their grandparents fought in. They really don't know. Perhaps they never knew. But they know that their grandparents had to endure suffering, hunger, fear. They had hopes. They struggled and fought for something bigger than their lives. And it still provides an example, something that is inspiring.
Ethical examples. They give us a sort of ethical example to. They are very precious today to understand what is happening in the world. Here in Europe, we have the war in Ukraine, and there is a lot of uncertainty in this time for what is happening. So remembering these stories is a sort of how can I say light that permits us to better understand what is going on. And this is also what we received from the interviewees, and they really appreciate uh, this project. First of all, because it's the first time that they have the opportunity to speak and to reflect in a during an interview, and they have the time to think, to remember, etc. So it's the opposite that in general they do by sending SMS and chatting. They are very fast, very short, a lot of time meaningless, etc. And yes, second, I can say that the ethical aspect is maybe very important.
I'm going to take a quick break, but I want to come back because Gianluca, you said something that they pull this out and they use it. I'm going to take a break, but I'm going to come right back because I'm going to talk about that.
Ciao, Chrissy. Your Italian got so much better. Brava.
Grazie. It's because I learned the best way possible.
How so?
Well, I learned that with apps, grammar books, and even YouTube videos, I could only get so far. I had to immerse myself. I noticed I did best when I was in Italy visiting family. That's where my level really soared.
And wow, did it work?
Thanks. I became much more confident, fast. That's why I created Footsteps Through Time. It's an Italian language experience. You don't just take Italian classes, you immerse yourself in a real Italian village. With lots of fun activities and excursions, it's life-changing.
I see. So, no more boring grammar, impersonal apps, just real conversations, real culture, and delicious food, of course.
Exactly. I'm so excited about this. Learn Italian by actually becoming part of the local community for a week and living it. So if you've been dreaming of Italy and the language, check out Footsteps Through Time in Italy.com. Book now and join the experience.
Andiamo!
Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support.
Hello everyone, my name is Claudio Relsano, and I am the author of the book, Lead from the Heart Up, Not the Neck Up, How to Create a Positive Winning Culture on the Field and in the Office. my years as a head baseball coach and a general manager of a pro baseball scouting company, I know that my leadership experiences that I've included in this book will help you become a better leader. You can get the book at ClaudioRelsano.com. Speaking of ClaudioRelsano.com, you can listen to my show, The Claudio Relsano Show, where I've interviewed such legends as Mario Andretti, Dick Vermeil, Rocky Blyer, and many, many others. And I also have an entrepreneurial program there talking about my entrepreneurial experiences. So hopefully that will help you, and hopefully you will enjoy that. And also, Sports Corner, hosted by Ralph Williams, co-host with myself, Jim Frazier, and Luther Dupree Jr. We appear on 92.5 FM, 1250 AM, The Answer, Salem Radio, every Saturday here in Pittsburgh, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy all the shows, and I hope you enjoy my book.
We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. Okay, welcome back. I'm joined by Gianluca Cinelli and Patrizia Piredda. Did I say that right? I like it. I'm working on that.
Yes.
I got
Yes,
to.
Piredda,
Ho bisogno di
Cinelli.
parlare correttamente. Ma I want to talk about something because you know, I'll give you a good example. You have groups that say, "Oh, the president's a fascist. They're a fascist." And I remember you and I we talked about this before. We're using terms that invoke the fear of World War II. So to sit there and say, and I don't care about politics, but I'll just give you a good example. They say, oh, Trump's a fascist. If you say that, then you have no idea what a fascist is. Because if you had gone out and protested, say, Mussolini, you would have been shot, killed, or arrested for protesting, peaceful or not. So the idea that you can criticize your government is the first clue that you do not live under a fascist government. But to your point, what's happening is people say, we don't want to go through that again. And so they bring it up to invoke fear. So people have forgotten truths of what really was fascism, what really is communism. You're talking about World War II. I've talked to people that lived in Eastern Europe when there was a Soviet Union. And when they hear people now saying, oh, communism's not that bad, socialism's not that bad, you don't understand, and they want to pull their hair out because they say, no, I lived it. I know what it really means. And so I think, to your point, why this is important is because people that lived under these, for real, when fascism, socialism comes, when they lived under the true bad governments, if you forget what life really was, then you can just scare people. Oh, they're fascists. They're socialists. But you don't even know what it means. And so I think hearing from people who lived under it, but in this case, you're hearing the first and second generation afterwards. Now, having said that, in the interviews that you've conducted, were there any things said that really surprised you?
Many things. Many things. Because we collect stories, life stories. We didn't say this at the beginning. The interviews that we conduct, that we record, are not based on questionnaires. There are no fixed questions and answers. There is no scheme. There are conversation, open conversation, informal
Dialogue.
conversation, and they are based on dialogue. Exactly. So what that means that we approach people, we invite people to share freely what they want to share, what they feel like sharing, and if they're happy with that, we do it. And that means that we just steer the conversation because we have interests in things that we want to cover, so to say. But on the other hand, we have these people who have their stories to tell. They know what they are talking about. They knew the people they are talking about, so they are involved in that. That means that they bring up things of their lives, including opinion, ideas, family mythologies, legend, stories, anything. And we start from these memories of the war to reach the present day, because people we talk to live today, they are real people, and they did not live the Second World War, but they live today what is going on. So they have also a clear idea, personal idea of how things are going. So these interviews, in the end, are surprising because there is so much life in there. There is not an academic discussion about history and the past. Even when we speak with historians, so people who do that as a profession. There is personal involvement. Of course, stories can be happy, sad. There is loss. There can be violence. There can be suppression of bad memories, and sometimes there are also, very uncomfortable stories, because we have had examples of people who had, so in the same family, partisans and fascists. So the two sides of the family were on the two sides of the fighting. And this reverberated across the generations. They also had fights or discussion. But, it's in the end, everybody grew in that. And so we collect this big picture that tells us how the memory of a very important event that has shaped the image and the order we know today, we have known for decades, for 80 years. That memory has transformed. We see how this memory is changing, is dynamic, is a living memory. So people really, really are in there. Yeah, this is the most surprising thing. Patrizia said correctly, the enthusiasm of people. People happy to share these memories and knowing to be part, of public discourse with their private stories. This is a very, very interesting point of contact between the small and the large.
And it's funny because when I was doing the interviews, that's the biggest thing that I believe. Everybody has a story, and I think we all want to be heard, especially the people that, to your point, it's not all sad stories, but there's definitely, for a lack of better term, trauma there. And I give you a good example. And a lot of Americans probably don't know that after the war and towards the end of the war, the treatment of civilians, depending on the country, was very bad. The German people were, for years, there were mass rapes, murders, and it happened in Italy too by some of the Allied troops. Now, to your point, these people survived this trauma, this brutality. Their cities are destroyed. They're poor. Maybe they're on the winning side. Maybe they're on the losing side. But life goes on. And now they're going to raise children in these ashes, basically, in these bombed out cities. And they've got to kind of recover from that. Now those children grow up. So you figure kids that were born in the late 40s, early 50s would have easily seen destroyed cities in Europe, depending on the country. They would have seen rubble. There was rubble into the 70s in some places. It just took so long to rebuild. So now to your point. So now if I'm born in the late 40s, early 50s, I'm the first generation after the war. I don't see the war, but I see the consequences, and I'm being raised by people that endured this. And that enduring, depending on your experience, could have been very traumatic. Again, think about the Italians, the Germans, even the French, what they did to some of their women when they called them collaborators. They didn't kill them necessarily, but they didn't treat them well. The German women endured it from both the U.S., Russian, the French. The German prisoners didn't go home for years after the war. The Italian civilians that were raped and murdered by both the Germans and the Allies. So you have all these bad things happening. Now the war's over. You don't just turn a switch. You have kids and you try, but you live with this trauma and you wonder, and this is to your point now, you live with this trauma and you raise a family with the trauma in your head. And you wonder how far down the line does that go? And I'm wondering, in your stories, did you have people that talked, and said, I am still affected by what happened 70 years ago because it was so bad to my family that it still impacts me? Because there is, and I believe this, there is a ripple effect. Just because the war is over doesn't mean the bad is over. The bad went on for years afterwards. So I'm curious, during your interviews, did you get a sense, whether it was good or bad, that there was still an influence from the war and the people you interviewed?
Yes, sometimes it happens. Sometimes that is the case. There are people who still have to cope with, to deal with the effects, long-term effects of these traumatic experiences. It is difficult to generalize because on the whole corpus, there are people who can cry remembering these things. And people who can cry just because they feel this wave of gratitude for their grandparents who endured the war, survived, and permitted their parents to live, to grow, and they built something, they rebuilt the nation, and so on. What can we say is that the most traumatic aspects, especially ideological, are somehow dampened. They are not that strong with the people we talk to today because many years have gone, and perhaps because their grandparents many times told the stories, removing the worst, just as if they were fables or something like that.
Right.
And we must say that there is a big difference between the interviews recorded with Italians and the interviews recorded with Italian Americans, because the people who were born in the United States in the 60s, they never saw the war. They never saw the destroyed cities, if not in TV, in movies or in documentaries. They did not know what it means to be occupied. They never endured.
To have nothing to eat.
Right.
Exactly.
Nothing to...
Americans do not know how lucky they are. They don't know. I have had the misfortune of having been in some rough situations in my military career. So I know when you lose, you really appreciate what you have. But if you were born into the victors, we had a big boom everybody had a boom after the war, economic. The war is over. We got to spend money now to rebuild. But in America, you had all these troops coming home with money in their pocket, with a new ideas, and it was a boom. In Europe, we had to in Japan, we had to implement the Marshall Plan, and in Japan, we had to rebuild just to get houses back so people had someplace to live. So you're right. They're obviously going to be very different, but I do believe that is also part of the problem for Europe's problems now, because I think there is still fear of reliving that. I think enough people know we don't want to do that again. And the problem is now the pendulum has gone the other way, because you look at all the problems these countries are having, essentially being invaded for lack of. I'm trying to be very not political, but there is a lot of problems in Europe, and it's because they don't want to. Well, if we kick them out, people are going to think we're fascists, and we don't want to be like the Nazis, and they're so afraid of that. That again, that's why I go back to your point, Gianluca. People pull out World War II when it's convenient for them. They don't really have a full context. It doesn't mean you cannot have a culture, a civilization, a country, Because if you're proud of your country, does that make you a national socialist? Of course not. But people will accuse you of that because it'll invoke memories of the war. And you say, well, again, I don't want to do that again. So I'm just going to be very easy so we don't have that problem. Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
but it is not only a matter of fear of falling again in that pit. In Europe, so much has been done for decades to get over the national division, the national separation among the countries, the peoples. In Europe, we are not one single. We're not, okay, we are Europeans, okay. But that means that if you are Italian, you struggle to understand the habits, culture, the mentality of a German or of a British, of a Frenchman, and you try to see similarities. You try to, um, you know, to enhance your good sides and minimize your bad sides, and we make jokes on each other. That's human, that's normal, because I think that in the States, people in the north make jokes about Americans in the south and so on.
Absolutely.
But in Europe, that has meant centuries of wars, and borders here means a lot. And when we experienced for the first time in the early 2000s the opening of the borders, the freedom of moving from
It
one
was
country to
incredible
another, that
that.
was incredible. It was, sense of freedom, of liberty. You really sensed that it was a new era. And what we are afraid today, perhaps, is not only the idea of war and destruction, because Europe has been destroyed over and over again. The same cities have been built and rebuilt again and again. No, the point is, I think that we are very, very scared of wasting that uh, great patrimony that we have built one generation after another, starting from what we learned from our grandfathers, grandmothers, who lived the years when being a German in Europe was really a problem, because on one hand you felt the guilt of being a German. On the other hand, you had the right to say, as a human being, as a citizen, as an individual, I did not murder anyone. But at the same time, you have to carry the burden of your national guilt. It's a very difficult situation, and nobody in Europe was actually totally, completely
That's
innocent,
right.
because in Italy we had fascism and we exported
In
fascism.
Spain,
In Germany there was national socialism. In Spain there was this fascism, and
Vichy in France.
Britain anyway was an empire, and they deployed so many troops from the other side of the world. Everybody was in a way, you had dirty hands. So it's a very difficult memory, very difficult legacy. And we try to understand what remains of that. Of course, some people are aware of that. Some people can you delve in depth. Some people just say, okay, it's far away. My grandparents endured that. I'm very grateful. And it's not that important anymore. Okay, but normally it is, because we understand that there there are roots. In that moment, there are deep, profound roots of what we are today. You know.
Now, before I go, I want to give you guys a chance. Where can folks go to learn more? And I'll put this link in the description, but let us know the website and where we can go find out more information.
Yes, I sent here a copy here for you, a link
Come si
in
chiama il
chat.
sito? Come si
The
chiama il
sito, the
sito?
name of the site is Memogen English.
Memogen English. Okay.
www.memogenenglish.wordpress.com.
Okay. Perfect.
This is the English version.
This is
There is the
English.
Italian and the English version.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in that, there is a menu, and people can find the Memo Amit project that is devoted to Italian Americans. We have a contact form. If anyone is interested in reaching out, we are very happy to hear from anybody who wanted to know more or share the story. We would be
I'd like to
delighted.
encourage people to participate because I know when I did the films, after I did the films, people said, "Oh, you should have interviewed my grandmother. You should." I said, "I don't know that." So this is perfect. So now we have a place we can send people to participate and share their stories. That's important. And kind of my final thought. Everything today is the result of decisions made yesterday. Simple fact. Tomorrow will be decided by the knowledge and the wisdom that we've gained from what we learned from yesterday. We make those decisions today, and that ultimately results in what tomorrow will be. So if people wonder why history is important, it's important because it's who you are, where you are right now because of someone else's decisions. The world is in the place it is right now because of decisions from a long time ago. Now, final thought. World War II was the result of World War I and how the war and the treaty ended. So if the treaty had been done differently, it would not have hurt the Germans so much. They would have not been in the situation they were in and resulted in that. So you say, well, okay, that's over. However, things like the UN Security Council today, the countries that are on there were the victors from World War II. So you have to step back and realize that the construction of the world, the borders, the countries, they were redrawn after World War II again. And so, now when the Russians occupied a lot of Eastern Europe, eventually those countries are no longer occupied and they split up. But all of that is decisions. So today, the situation we're in is because of old decisions. And even the Middle East is the result of 100 and something years ago, somebody drawing lines on a map and saying, this is a country, this is a country, this is a country. So you have to, if you really want to understand what's going on in the world today, you have to understand the origins, and that means honest look at history. So Patrizia, Gianluca, I want to thank you both again for joining me. I'm going to share that link, and again, I can't thank you enough for staying up late and giving me your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
It was very nice.
Thank you again. Grazie mille. And for our listeners, thank you again for tuning in. And hopefully Claudia will be back with me in a week. And in the meantime, you have a blessed week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Talking Business and Life with Claudio Relsano and Steve Mancini. Tune in next week for more impactful business and life experiences with Claudio and Steve.